Which do I have a higher likelihood of passing? The progress exam I just took, or the driver's license test?
Do you believe in magic?
So I just want to start out this video by saying I hate Anki. I was wearing this turtleneck the other day and someone went up to me and told me, "You look like Elizabeth Holmes." Before we get started, did anybody see the winner of the Nobel Prize in Chemistry? So I gotta be honest, I had meant to film this video 6 weeks ago, but then another 6 weeks passed and here we are. I am finally sitting down to make this video. How the curriculum is structured here is that we learn in blocks. So the first block was 6 weeks and it occurred during the summer, and that block was called Foundations. And then just recently, so this past Monday, we finished the second 6-week block of our first organ system, which was the cardiovascular system. And so I wanted to sit down at the end of every block and make these types of videos where I just reflect on my experience to sort of document the things that I learned and how I evolved. But I ended up just going home for that week break after the summer block and watching a lot of movies, to be honest. Maybe it's a good thing because in this video I'm gonna reflect not only on the summer block but then also the cardio block, which I think is more interesting in my opinion. Today is Saturday and this past Monday we just took our first progress exam, which essentially encompassed all the material that we had learned throughout the summer, in addition to the material that we learned in the 6 weeks that we learned the cardiovascular system. And let's just say there was a lot of process of elimination in that exam. The 3 to 2 weeks leading up to the exam, I ended up getting so busy with school stuff that I had to put a lot of the YouTube editing on hold. And so now I'm backed up like 5 videos. There's just too much content, you know? Like, I came to medical school for the content and now there's just too much, you know? Like, there's just so much content, I can't keep up with all the editing that I have to do. And so I have like 5 videos that I have footage for, but I haven't had a chance to sit down and edit. And this content goes back all the way up until summer school stuff. And now that the progress exam is over and I have a little bit more time before the next one comes up, I'm gonna try to slowly but surely pump some of these videos out. Okay, so what I'm gonna be talking about in this video, I sort of created an outline. No, I didn't. There's a few things that I roughly know that I want to talk about. So I know I want to talk about the academics because this is medical school, so we are learning quite a bit. The people that I've encountered here, the extracurriculars that I've been doing. I don't know, I think some people may find that interesting. Yes. Alright, so for the first topic, which is academics, I briefly mentioned this prior to this sentence. I haven't done this in a while, okay? Alright, so let's start off with academics. So I briefly mentioned this earlier, but the first 6-week block that we had was titled Foundations, and it essentially covered all of science. Immunology, genetics, metabolism, biochemistry, cell biology, pathology, statistics, an engineering class. So we learned a lot. And then the second 6-week block that we just finished was cardio. So this was the first organ system block that we covered so far. And now we're just starting respiratory. But I really enjoyed the cardio block. You know, the heart, it's a fairly important organ, I believe. No, but I really enjoyed cardio. It was definitely something that I've never learned before. I'll get into this a little bit later, but I didn't really take anatomy and physiology in college, so all of the material covered in cardio was something that I've never learned before, which I'm glad of because I don't want to keep repeating the same content and learning the same stuff over and over again. It's pretty crazy to think that at the first 6 weeks of cardio, I literally didn't know what a coronary artery was. And then fast forward like 5 to 6 weeks later, and the amount of knowledge that we gained over those 6 weeks is pretty incredible. Like at the end, we were all talking about arrhythmias and STEMIs and NSTEMIs and angina. And obviously this is, just the surface of cardio and all of the knowledge that goes along with that. But the growing pains that we experience over the 6 weeks is it's interesting and fun to reflect on. In my opinion, I think the coolest thing is the parallel and analogies that you can make between the cardiovascular system and EE, or electrical engineering. And I don't know if it's because I'm at an engineering school that they emphasize, these analogies that you can make between these two different domains of knowledge. But drawing upon all of the EE stuff that I learned in undergrad was actually very beneficial and helpful for me to better understand the cardiovascular system. So the coolest thing that I think I learned over the past 6 weeks was modeling the fetal circulation as an electrical circuit. As a fetus, your blood flow is different from when you're born. And so as a fetus, you could model the blood flow as 3 resistors in parallel. And so the voltage source in this case would be the heart. It's the pump, it's the source of the blood flow. And the first resistor would be the pulmonary circuit, the second would be the placental circuit, and the third would be the systemic circuit. And when you're a fetus, you have high resistance, right, in your pulmonary circuit because your lungs aren't fully developed yet. And so a majority of the blood flow will go through the other 2 resistors in your circuit. But I think the coolest thing is that when the fetus turns into a neonate, the foramen ovale closes and the resistance in the pulmonary circuit suddenly drops significantly. And then the placental circuit is cut off, right? Because the baby is separated from the placenta source of oxygen. And then now you have 2 resistors in series. So the transition went from 3 resistors in parallel to 2 resistors in series. All right, so how I perceive the learning system here is that it's divided into 3 areas. So the first would be the technical knowledge, which is the medical knowledge that we gain in our classes. And then the second would be the clinical skills. So all the soft skills of learning how to interview and talk to patients and building rapport and asking the right questions when you are building the HPI and chief complaint and writing your note. And then the third is anatomy. So some medical schools I've heard have different ways of doing their anatomy lab. Some schools don't have cadavers. They instead have a virtual dissection, I believe. But here at our school, we have actual live cadavers, and we perform 100% of the dissection. Okay, so let's first start off with the first category I mentioned, which is building the technical and medical knowledge in our classes. So how it works is at the end of every week, we have a weekly quiz. And so the weekly quiz will become available to us every Friday at around like 5 p.m. And then it'll be due on your own time. So you have to take it anytime between Friday to Sunday at 5 p.m. And it doesn't matter when you take it. You can take it whenever you feel like you're ready. And these quizzes are called firecrackers. I don't know why they're called firecrackers because they're not popping. They're not a fun time. I mean, who likes to take a quiz, right? But in my opinion, I'm actually pretty grateful that we have these quizzes because knowing my study habits from undergrad, I'm not gonna keep up with the material, right? Until the very end of the block when we have an exam or something that will suddenly spark a fire of motivation in me to study. So having these weekly quizzes is good because it kept me on track over the entire cardio block. And I think that the material that we're learning is way too much for you to hold off until the last second to actually learn. And so the goal is to get an average of over 70%. So all of your weekly quiz scores are averaged, and if you get an average score of above 70%, then you'll pass. Okay, so more on the progress exam. We took took our progress exam on Monday. And one thing that I like about how our school runs our progress exams is that they are not in-house written questions, but instead they are NBME exams. So the reason why I like that is because I've heard that it prepares you a lot better for your board exams when you take past board exam questions. And studying to pass a board exam, in my opinion, is a lot more effective than studying to take an exam that people at your school have written. Our past progress exam was 127 questions in 3 hours, and it was all multiple choice. So we all went to the lecture hall at 7:30 a.m. on Monday to take it, and we all took it on our own laptop. And so we all downloaded the secure browser portal for the NBME. The multiple choice questions, they don't have choices, just A through E. So we definitely had a couple questions that were like A through J or like A through M. I'm not too familiar with the alphabet system, but I know that some of the questions had choices beyond E. It was kind of hilarious because some of the questions, the answer choices literally looked like an N by N matrix. Like imagine 5 variables and then every possible permutation of those variables was an answer choice. So let's just say that process of elimination was an important skill to employ during this exam, and hope. But all in all, it was fun.
Do you believe in magic?
So I might make an entirely separate video on this, but I could just touch upon it briefly here. It's sort of interesting to compare my experience in academics as an undergrad versus in medical school. Obviously, I haven't been in medical school for very long, but I mean, this is the point of the video, right? Because when I make the second video like this at the end of the next block, I'm obviously gonna have a different perspective, right? But in undergrad, I didn't do a lot of memorization in my classes, right? Because for the engineering classes, you couldn't just rely on memorization in order to do well in the exam. In fact, my professors had the philosophy that you can walk into any of our exams with 0 prior knowledge because they'll give everything to you. So they'll give you a formula sheet with all of the formulas and all of the values. The only thing you need to walk into the exam with in order to do well is just an intuitive understanding of the material. And from there, you could derive anything that you wanted. In fact, I sort of avoided taking the classes that had a lot of memorization. So in undergrad, I didn't take a lot of biology. I took the biology classes to graduate and to fulfill the med school prerequisites. And so in medical school, I wouldn't say it's 100% memorization, but you're gonna have to sit down and brute force learn some of the material, right? Because there's a lot of knowledge to be gained. You definitely need to understand, because you need to understand what's going on in the body and then reinforce that understanding with memorization to a certain extent. And that's the reason why Anki is so highly valued, I think, among medical students. And I'll make an entirely separate video on my thoughts on Anki. I also haven't been using that for very long, but I have some thoughts on it. And I think it's also interesting to compare the mentality between undergrad versus now. And so in undergrad, I feel like the mentality is centered mostly on what activities and extracurriculars am I going to pursue so that it looks good on a medical school application, which is fine because that's what you're working towards. But then once you get in and you're in med school and you're doing the thing that you wanted to pursue in the first place, now the mentality has shifted to how can I work hard so that I can be truly excellent at what I want to do. Okay, so now I'll talk a little bit about the clinical skills portion. And I think the most interesting thing about this portion of our education is, number 1, interacting with standardized patients, and number 2, simulations. So I think all med schools have this, where they'll hire people to act as standardized patients, who present with certain symptoms of an illness, and we're taught to interview them. And so practicing with standardized patients is really helpful because every week we go into clinic for 4 hours where we'll practice speaking to real patients. And it helps, right, to practice in a controlled setting before you go and do the real thing. And it's really interesting to note the evolution of our interviewing skills from the beginning of the summer up until now. And so we're split up into groups of around 4 med students and then 1 instructor. And there's 4 rooms. So each of the med students takes turn interviewing the patient in front of the other 3 students and the instructor. And so this was beneficial because you can learn from your other classmates' mistakes, right? And it was so funny because the very first time we ever walked in there, we were all so bad. I was so bad. Like, I think it was a combination of ignorance, nerves, and yeah, that's it. It was funny because we had a super simple task and then we all struggled to do it because we had no idea what we were doing. And then you fast forward a couple weeks later and we're all decently competent now at interviewing patients. It was funny because the very first time I ever did it, that day, I went to the nearby coffee shop and I ordered a matcha latte. Okay, and it's weird because I drink coffee on a daily basis. So I thought I'd be able to handle the natural progressive climb of a matcha latte. But that matcha latte, I should have known better. It was so green. I was drinking the matcha latte before my turn to go and speak to the patient, and my heart rate from the matcha latte was like greater than 1,000. And I go into the exam room and my heart is pounding, right? Because number 1, the matcha latte, and then number 2, nerves because it's my first time. And so I get through the interview, barely. And when I finish, the instructor is giving me feedback. And he goes, Megan, I think one of the most notable things about what I just watched was that you're very calm. In my head, I'm like, I didn't feel very calm. Okay, and then the other thing I wanted to talk about in clinical skills were simulations. So I'm not sure if this is universal to other med schools, but here we have these things called simulations where we will simulate a medical emergency or an event, and we will not act, but we'll go through the conversation with the patient and the actions that we're gonna take after we interview a patient. It's almost like acting, but then you're not, because you're trying to apply all the things that you've learned. So it's not really acting because it's real in a sense, but the scenario is simulated. And I don't know, it's been really fun. I think it's cool. And so how the simulation that we've done so far have worked is that I'll be in a group of 4 other medical students, and then we'll go into the simulated ER room. And because we were in the cardio block, our patient was having a heart attack. And so the standardized patient was in the gown on the bed, and she was complaining of, chest pain radiating to the left arm. And then we practiced interviewing her, and then we also practiced picking what medications we were then going to give her, and then what other further action steps we were going to take with this patient. It was interesting to see how when you're suddenly presented with the scenario, how you're gonna react, because it's easy to just sit down and take a multiple choice test. But then when you're actually presented with a real, quote unquote, real scenario, you'll realize that you have to suddenly pick from this network of knowledge that you've put together for yourself and then apply what you've picked to that scenario. Okay, so the third thing I wanted to talk about for academics was anatomy lab. And I think anatomy lab is my most favorite class. And the instructors that we have here are so nice. So every week we have anatomy lab for around 2 to 3 hours. And each group of students, which is around 4 students, is assigned a cadaver. And the portion of the cadaver that we dissect corresponds to the region of the body that we're learning in the classes for that week or block. So in cardio, we dissected the heart. And it's definitely a surreal experience, I think, to dissect a cadaver. And it's definitely not fun for everyone. For understandable reasons. But some people really enjoy it. I really enjoy it because, you know, being able to see the body in 3D and work with it with your own hands is a lot different than reading about it in 2D in a textbook. Okay, now that we're done with academics, thank goodness. I guess I could talk a little bit about the people that I've met here. So, I know this is very cliche, but my classmates have definitely made my experience here a lot more fun and enjoyable than I would have had I not met them. The people that I've met here is the best part of the experience that I've had so far. I think when you have people who studied engineering in undergrad or pursued an engineering career before making that transition into medicine, you get a very interesting and unique group of people. And it's been a lot of fun getting to know them a lot better over these past couple weeks. And I look forward to the next 4 years that I will have with them. I've only been here for like 12 weeks, but the amount of stories and content that have happened and accumulated over the past 12 weeks is almost unimaginable. So I really like to write, and it's always been a dream of mine to one day write scripts for TV shows or movies. And I'm just thinking that the characters in those scripts and the events that will take place in those scripts will 100% be inspired by my classmates and the stories that have happened in medical school. And the mentorship has also been super helpful, both from older med students and also from physicians. I also have a pod parent. The entire medical school, so not just our year, but the years above us, is divided into 4 pods. And so my pod parent has been very helpful so far. Shout out to Ashka. And then my physician mentor is my preceptor. So I mentioned earlier that I go in every week into clinic. And so when I go into clinic, I have a physician mentor, and that is my preceptor. He's just a really great teacher, you know, and really takes the time to teach me in between seeing patients. And he is very busy, and I always make the joke that whenever I come in, I derail his schedule, because when I go in to speak to the patient, it obviously takes a lot longer than if he were to go in, but he lets me go in because it's a really helpful learning experience for me, right? And then after the session, I'll meet with him in the office, and then we'll discuss. And the other physician mentor that I have is also one of the coolest people that I've met here, and he will appear in future videos per his consent, but he is a general surgeon and CMO, and he took a group of students of us out to dinner a couple weeks ago, and that was a lot of fun. He is very hilarious. All right, let's briefly touch upon some extracurriculars that I've gotten myself entangled in. The most important, of course, being YouTube. I'm here for the content, remember? Come on, keep up. So I am part of clubs and interest groups, and so these are super helpful because I don't know what specialty I want to go into yet, and so being a part of these helps me find out what I'm interested in and what I'm not interested in. I am also having a lot of fun volunteering for Avicenna. So Avicenna is a free clinic here in Champaign that provides healthcare resources for those in need. I am also participating in research. For those of you guys who have been following this channel for a while, you guys know that I am into the whole computational chemistry thing. So I am part of a chemistry lab here, and that work is computational. And then I'm also part of a neurosurgery research lab, and I'm looking forward to that. That's exciting. I don't know if I want to do neurosurgery at all yet, but I think that the research is exciting, and you know, it's something that I don't know a lot about, obviously, the field of neurosurgery, but it sounds interesting and I'm excited. On that note, I am going to end this video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you around.
I remember life was simple. We were 18, no plans made. Could we go back to the beginning?